I ask you to do this for me. Who's your true sophomore redshirt freshman that's going to break out in the Big 12 this year?
Who? True sophomore redshirt freshman. Oh, let me go back and look at that. That would be the 2018 class, right? Or
2019.
No,
2019.
2019.
2019. So, I mean, there's a couple of guys that I could throw out there, but I don't want to poison the water.
No, go for it. I'll keep looking.
Okay, so there are a couple of guys that I think could fit this. Well, obviously, Spencer Rattler is one of them. He has to win the job, but I've basically written him in red ink as a starting quarterback at Oklahoma. He's getting better Heisman odds than Sam Ehlinger, which I thought was ridiculous, but also kind of sort of makes sense if you believe in Lincoln Riley because that's what you're betting on. Jaden Hazelwood is also another one at Oklahoma that I really, really like. But the guy that I'm most interested to see is Jordan Whittington. I want to I'm fascinated by that kiddo as an athlete. I mean, he didn't do a whole lot at his first year because he was hurt, but in the state championship game, I believe it was 334 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns, and then he played on defense and had 11 tackles. I think he had offensive and defensive MVP in a state championship game.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, he did.
Okay.
It's insane.
Yeah, and I'm like, what are they going to do with him? That's I get athlete, but you got to play him somewhere. So, I mean, we're all looking at Rattler. We're all looking at Hazelwood. We're all looking at who we're looking at. But I'm more interested in the guys I haven't seen and the guys that I know were absolute monsters in high school. The Kyler Murrays, if you will. Just the guys that you're like, man, how does that guy not play in the NFL tomorrow? And I think Whittington is one of those.
Yeah. Well, and he's obviously a guy, when you talk about Whittington, who a lot of people expected him to kind of do what Roschon Johnson did last year and then stuff, right? I mean, he was supposed to kind of step in. They moved him from receiver to running back last offseason because of their issues with depth. But, I think that the move is right now is they're planning to move him back to receiver, which is going to be interesting. I mean, he hasn't taken receiver reps in a little while, but you mentioned him. He is just one of those guys who is an insane, crazy athlete. I mean, you just can't almost bet against him because he's so good at what he does. Talking about some other guys, one guy at Baylor who I really liked, who was a guy who did play a little last year, was TJ Franklin.
Yeah, okay.
He's a guy who played a little bit interior and on the upside. And in a similar way, Gabe Hall as well was another guy who played a lot inside, which is pretty rare to see. Obviously, a guy who's 18 years old playing inside. I mean, that's not really something that happens as a true freshman, but he's the sort of guy that did that. Another guy that you mentioned from Texas last year, Jake Smith. I mean, Jake Smith obviously had a really good first year. He's a lot faster than people sort of maybe think he is. And he's one of those guys who's really, really just good at getting open. He's one of those guys who is a good route runner. He's a guy who has breakaway speed. He's a guy who, last year he was kind of able to be a third receiver, and he dominated in that slot role. And so I'm curious to see what he'll do. One guy in the Big 12 from outside of the States, Breece Hall from Iowa State.
Okay.
I think that's a guy who, to close the year, I mean, he was basically putting up 100 yards a game. And I think that you mix him now with Brock Purdy, who's obviously improved tremendously, and you pair that with a really good defense. I mean, this is what you're looking for, right? This is everything that you want of your Matt Campbell. You want to have your star running back and quarterback and defense to go with it. And I think that Hall really proved last year. To compare him at this point to David Montgomery is unfair, but we saw how much David Montgomery was able to make that offense go at Iowa State when he was there. I think now heading into his true sophomore year, I think that this is really the time that he could take a big step.
Jake Smith was the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Arizona the same year that Spencer Rattler was a senior in high school. So just for those you don't know, he is legitimate. And if you watch him, you'll want to throw so many different names over the top of him. I know that because he's white and he's fast and he was a running back, people throw Christian McCaffrey out there. But that also meant Bijan Robinson coming out of there. They're just going to be so good, I think. But they've always been talented at Texas. That's not the problem. If they're ever going to do something, this is the year to do it. I mean, OU's going to be young, going to be inexperienced. You had a total changeover at Baylor, so they're not what we thought they were going to be in December. I mean, this is the year for Texas to be good if they're going to be good. Now, moving to the
and the other thing that I'll mention real quick is that not only was he Arizona Gatorade Player of the Year, he was National Gatorade Player of the Year.
There you go.
So that's the kind of athlete that
Golly, he's just a I can't wait to see him get more touches. Moving to the 2020 class, right, which is basically done with one exception. And I want to throw this kiddo out here because he's in Texas, and I've had so many questions about him even during this dead period. It's Zach Evans, right? Coming out of North Shore. I've had him going to Texas A&M. Even when he signed with Georgia, I was like, okay, so he's going to come out of the portal at 8M. Like, I just felt like that was it. And I know that there's a bunch of people that feel the same way about me or about him and feel the same way about me feeling about him. But what is it that, if anything, you've been able to see from him? And what are your reservations other than, I guess the obvious of he seems to not necessarily get it. He seems to be great when you put the ball in his hands. Everything else, you don't know what you're getting.
Yeah, the fact that he's still unsigned at this point is kind of insane. There was a point where he was talking about, like, obviously he planned to enroll early. Like, that's the sort of, how much this story has moved. I think this is one of the weirder stories of the past several years. And, look, I think that obviously –
weirder than Jamar Chase saying that he was going to Kansas there for like a week.
What's that?
Weirder than Jamar Chase saying that he was going to Kansas for like a week. Yeah.
Right. Even weirder than that. Or Kyler Murray tweeting out a Texas jersey.
Oh man, yeah.
That's the sort of stuff that we're talking about right now. But with Zach, here's the deal, right? I think that if I was a college coach, he is as good a running back prospect as you're going to find. He is complete. It's kind of funny at North Shore, his numbers were only okay, but the reason for that was because like they were dominating everybody. He was just their closer, basically, right? Like he just had to, go out there, dominate for like 10 carries and then go home. Mm-hmm. And he is sort of that total complete running back prospect. Can succeed in short yard, can succeed long yard, can break away, can be that sort of 5-6 yard back too. He is a big time player, and he's done it on the biggest stages. Look. If I were a college coach at one of the top programs, I don't know if I'd want to deal with the headache because he is a player right now who has, first of all, just doesn't know what he wants. The fact that you're going from Georgia to A&M to LSU to all these places that are completely different programs and just kind of saying, I don't know, who knows? Like at this point, when you planned on potentially enrolling in December, I think that that's a bad situation. And I think that it also, we've heard like. Is he going to be the sort of guy who's going to be able to keep up his grades? I think that's a big issue that we're going to have to keep an eye on. And I think that, when you look at what Zach Evans is going to do right now, and obviously absolutely none of us know at this point. I think that A&M's off the table for him right now. They kind of went with some other running backs, and I think they're done. The bridge is burned between him and Kirby Smart. He's not going to Georgia. And again, like LSU, they can just pick out their running backs wherever they want. Yeah, I don't think they have to deal with that.
No, they washed their hands early, like in January.
Right. And so, the funny thing is, right, like you look at his 247 page right now, the four teams that are still sort of listed as contenders are A&M, which again, I think isn't happening. And I also think it would be good for him to not be here right now, honestly, just kind of get away from some of the environment he's been in. The other teams that are listed, Florida, which, that's sort of a similar situation where like, do you need to deal with the headache?
Well, let me jump in because Florida he's probably going to take a visit there, and he was going to in March till this thing happened. I'm going to throw a scenario out because I know this is on the minds of folks that are listening, folks that have been paying attention to this channel religiously. Trey Semon jumps in the portal, comes out of Ohio State. OU is down to one running back with over 1,000 yards rushing in his career. Right, and Kennedy Brooks. Ramondre Stevenson is suspended for the first 5 games of the season. You don't know what you have in Marcus Major and his shoulder. TJ Pledger hasn't played as much as we thought he would. Seth McGowan's a freshman. Do you think that it's worth taking a flyer to try to get Zach Evans onto campus at Oklahoma, at a place where he would probably touch the ball right away? But are you willing to take the headache because, running back luck at Oklahoma, the only person that hasn't been hit yet is Kennedy Brooks, and I feel like it's about to be his turn.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question.
Okay.
I think that obviously with Kennedy Brooks coming back, you have your guy for 2020 in my opinion, and even when Stevenson obviously is kind of back and gets up to speed, I think that you've got a good rotation there. I don't think that Oklahoma is desperate for running backs, let's say. Now, losing Jace McClellan, I think that was a big deal, obviously. He was going to kind of be that next guy, especially after Kennedy Brooks. But McGowan's a really good player, too. And, Look, I think that Oklahoma has a really good team culture. I think that Lincoln Riley is a really good communicator, a really good leader. And obviously having a guy like DeMarco Murray now, leading that running back,
100%.
Maybe that's the type of guy who you really need. A guy who's been there and done that, been the running back for the Dallas Cowboys, done all this stuff. Maybe that's the guy that you need to tell Zach Evans to get his stuff in order, basically. But man, I think that you need to know some things about what you're getting from Zach Evans behind the scenes, like not obviously publicly, before I think that you can feel comfortable that you need to take that chance. Because again, Oklahoma's got running backs. I know that obviously it's a shallower room than maybe it's been the past couple of years after losing Sermon, but Oklahoma's got plenty of running backs that are really good. And even other guys at other positions who could switch to running back in a second and be, game breakers. So for me, I would say that taking a flyer on a kid that good is always something that you have to at least think about doing. But I don't feel like personally that Oklahoma needs to take that chance. But look, if Lincoln Riley did it, I would certainly not blame him.
Man, I don't know. I just know that I didn't expect Trey Semon, 1, to go into the portal, and 2, to basically be able to trade up, because that's what it is for me right now. Ohio State is going after a national championship in 2020. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I can't say the same about Oklahoma. It's a bridge year. I believe if OU goes 12-2 and wins a Big 12 championship, you count your blessings, because they're built for 21. They're not built for 20. They sure as hell weren't built for 2019, but made that happen. The last thing I wanted to ask you was, what did you think of the Jalen Hurts era at OU? Because since he's left, some things have come out, some words have been exchanged, and I've been on him as a passer from jump. I didn't believe it, but it feels like even Sermon was a casualty of this, because we saw a quarterback that was much more likely to pull the ball down and carry it than he was to dump it off. We saw a quarterback that was dependent on really one wide receiver, and when he had to another wide receiver, we had 100 passes caught between Charleston Rambo and CeeDee Lamb, and then the next closest person was 19. So what was your thinking of the Jalen Hurts era from a guy that doesn't necessarily be this close to it like I am every year?
Yeah, I think that in a lot of ways the Hurts era went better than I expected in terms of getting to the playoff, winning the Big 12, kind of being able to maintain in my opinion, look, the dude finished second in Heisman voting. I'm not going to say that he was a bad college player by any means, but a guy who was clearly not Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, right? To be able to kind of replace those two guys and still achieve a lot of the same things. No, obviously, there were differences in the team around him and the defense around him especially, but I think that the team performance was pretty good based on what I kind of expected when Hurts came in. And look, I still see people talk about Hurts, potentially being an NFL quarterback now, and I just don't get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's just a guy who, his arm has never really been consistent enough. At Alabama, his freshman year, that was an issue. Of sophomore year, that's why he kind of eventually lost the job. Junior year, he just was a backup, right?
Right.
That was sort of the whole deal, was that Jalen Hurts was not a good enough passer to be able to really, really, dominate in that aspect at this level. And I think that Lincoln Riley did a phenomenal job of getting the most out of him as a passer. Obviously, both of us watched plenty of Jalen Hurts, and we know that his performance wasn't necessarily as good as the numbers, but look at the numbers. They're insane. The fact that they were able to be as efficient as they were, I think is just such a testament to Lincoln Riley. And I think that Jalen Hurts was good for Oklahoma as a leader and, as sort of a face of the program, because he's a fantastic guy. I don't think that anybody's questioning that, but, look, I'm not going to go as far as saying now they're going to be better with Spencer Rattler, because you obviously just don't know. It's a completely different dynamic, but I do think that the passing aspect of the game is going to, potentially take a big step next year, because like you mentioned, you're not going to be sort of focusing in on those two guys and kind of not seeing the rest of the field. It's not going to be necessarily a 1 or 2 read offense. It's going to be a little bit more diverse on offense. And again, you mentioned, I was blown away when I realized how many more carries Jalen Hurts had than everybody else. That's insane to me. And I think that now, you've got a guy in Kennedy Brooks who I think is, a star. I think that he's next in line. I think that he's going to be the next all Big 12 running back and all those things. And now I think having a guy who is a little bit more willing to hand the ball off to his running back, who, an insanely good running back, I think that does change the complexion of the offense. Now, again, Spencer Rattler's still a redshirt freshman. I mean, we don't have to put Heisman expectations on him yet, but I do think that the Hurts era will be viewed in a couple of years as, this was a good year, this was a good transition, but I think that its biggest value is eventually going to be that just that Spencer Rattler got that year of development.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. If you're looking at it from the standpoint of you didn't have to burn up a redshirt year for Rattler, then it's a win. Last question that I'll have for you. I know that you're a big fan of college football, just period, that you're the guy who would much rather watch Mason Fine do a thing than figure out who's going to play in the college football playoff. I get that. But who's going to win the national championship this year?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think that you look at the teams that are going to compete for the top four. I think that there are, once again, 3 teams that are going to be above everybody else. And unfortunately, for the second year in a row, I think it's going to be the same 3 teams, right? And, so I think that Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State are best poised to do that. Look, and I think that each has their own advantages. I think that, Clemson has as much talent as anybody, obviously, and I think that they'll be motivated to come back after what happened last year. And I think that, Alabama, I mean, I think that they're back in the playoff. I don't think that there's a whole lot of question about that, in my opinion. I think they take LSU's place. And look, that receiver room, I mean, they lost 2 potential first-round receivers, and they still got Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, which is just so unfair. And I think that the defense will actually be a lot better, too, with what they have coming back. And then Ohio State, I mean, they probably have, I don't want to say the best quarterback in the bunch because one of the teams has Trevor Lawrence too, but he is a dynamic player, Justin Fields is. And I think that Trey Sermon getting added to that mix along with what they have on defense, I mean, I think that they're really, really good. If I had to pick a team right now to win the national title, I think I'm going to pick Clemson, but any of those 3 teams, I think it's going to be one of those 3 teams. I don't think there's going to be an LSU surprise team this year.
No, man, I picked Alabama in January. I'm going to stick with that because I really love what they return on defense. Like you mentioned, Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, but there's also a Najee Harris who decided to come back.
Yeah.
Drew Sanders has an opportunity to help them out defensively, but I'm interested to see if Kirby Smart will take the handcuffs off of Todd Monken and let Stuart Brand Cam Newton do something. Because that week 3 matchup is going to be fun, but it's by no means going to be what we expected. That one I think is going to have more to say about who's playing a national championship game than anything else. Kind of like Texas LSU became that game for us last year. We didn't know it at the time. We all thought it was cool, but I didn't know that was how close Texas was. So while I'm picking Alabama to win the national championship, I think Georgia could be there if Monken and Stuart Brand Cam Newton, Jamie Newman, could figure out some things because they just got a stable of backs back there. But Texas, you ought to be able to do something this year. And Oregon, I think Oregon could be good. I'm going to get to see them against Ohio State, but Ohio State's going to be Ohio State. So I think it's going to be really fun to see basically 3 through about 12, right? I think those are going to be fun teams to watch. I don't even know if Oklahoma's going to be one of them. I'm being very clear-eyed about that. I know that I catch a lot of hell about it. I know that, I came to this as an OU fan and then everything else kind of blew up. But hey, Shehan, man, you're so cool. Thank you so much. You're so knowledgeable. You're so fun to talk to. You gave us an hour of your time. I so appreciate this, man.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for having me. I know that, look, I think that all of us are looking for something to talk about during this period. So this was a lot of fun.
Right on. That's Shehan Jeyarajah, insider at Dave Campbell Texas Football. Give him a follow on the Twitters at Shehan Jeyarajah. Read his work. Subscribe to the magazine. I do. And I can't wait to get my magazine in the mail this summer. Lord willing, we have college football. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.